everyone, this is PK Entertainment and we are back again, and here now we have another video for you, and we're going to do some box office reporting for Spider-Man Across the Spiderverse in its opening weekend of release for the period covering Friday the 2nd to Sunday the 4th of June 2023. So we'll get straight into the numbers then, and within US cinemas, the animated sequel was a big hit, scoring a minimum of 120 million in its opening weekend, becoming the second highest opening of 2023 behind Super Mario Bros. So obviously this easily takes the number one spot, which last week was occupied by the Little Mermaid, which drops down to number 2. Internationally, Spider-Verse took in an estimated 88 million for a global take of around 208 to 210 million. Now already this marks what looks to be a significant uptake in performance from the first film, which in 2018 opened to only 35 million in the US and crossed overall 384.5 million worldwide. And this sequel is going to blow past that total, if not by the second week, then definitely the third week of its release. Provided it doesn't see a massive drop in its second weekend, we should be looking at the very least of around 600 to 700 million dollars worldwide overall. We then asked the question, does it have a shot at grossing $1 billion? Well, June is a very competitive month with lots of high profile releases, and this could work against Spider-Verse, but it should definitely end up amongst one of the highest grossing movies of the year. And I think the movie's success yet again underlines Spider-Man as a IP character, still today one of the most culturally popular amongst all audiences. And to be honest, he's always been that way ever since he was created back in the 60s. When we look overall, particularly in the early 2000s with the emergence of the Sam Raimi Spider-Man movies, nearly all of the films post that trilogy have been very successful at the box office. And he's had a whole history of animated movies and series and comic books which are still very prolific today. He still stands alongside Batman as probably the most popular comic book character in modern day culture. So the character is always going to draw interest, whether it's the Peter Parker or Miles Morales version, and alongside this success, amidst lots of hype and speculation, it probably won't be too much longer now before we see a live action interpretation of Miles Morales. Now whether that will be within the Sony verse in terms of their Spider-Man characters, or whether that will be linked somehow to the MCU, we will wait and see what happens in the future. If I'm guessing, I'll probably say Sony will try and keep the character in live action for their own universe, because of course then they can reap all of the rewards entirely for themselves, rather than having to share it with Marvel. For me personally, I think it would probably be best to complete the era of Tom Holland as Spider-Man first, and then have Miles Morales appear afterwards. Otherwise this could cause confusion amongst more general audiences who aren't really familiar with having two Spider-Mans at the same time. But that's more discussion later on down the line, but without question, the success of Spider-Verse definitely means that we will probably see Miles Morales far more prolifically within the next coming years within mainstream entertainment. Now it wasn't as pleasing news for Disney's The Little Mermaid, which dropped 58% in its third weekend of release within US cinemas for a take approximately around $14 million. It is now overall taking roughly around 186 million in the US territory. Internationally, it made around another 70 million to hit approximately 140.5 million. The final global tally currently stands at around 326 million. So I think the original assumption that we talked about last week of an overall tally of around 500 to 600 million is still looking likely. I think they can forget about any aspirations of getting to 1 billion worldwide. I don't think that's going to happen now. And when you consider that the last 3 live action Disney remakes, Beauty and the Beast, The Lion King and Aladdin, all hit around $1 billion or over, The Little Mermaid, with that huge budget alone of $250 million, is likely going to be seen as a massive disappointment. And following the lengthy debate about the race swapping in terms of the lead character, perhaps this is an overall lesson for Disney that going forward, it would probably be best to stay closer to the source material when remaking these classic animated films. Again, we've talked about this previously within the channel, about that brand familiarity and recognition, especially when you are relying on an audience from a previous generation who has a strong affection for the original source material. Yes, I understand Disney wants to promote diversity and representation, and they can speak about that as much as it wants. But at the end of the day, if you go too far in that direction, and you end up alienating the original fan base, then it's going to cost you money. And it definitely looks like the Little Mermaid is going to be very costly for Disney this time round. So don't be surprised if they continue with these remakes that we see going forward, a far more initiative in staying true to the original source material and recreating the classic look of the animated films, as that's what's garnered them success previously before. We then look at another big budget struggling to really make its impact, and that is Fast X, which dropped 60% to number 5 position within US cinemas with a take of around $9 to $10 million, only getting now to overall $128.4 million in that territory. Overall, its global tally now stands at $608 million. So then we have to ask the question as to whether this installment may not get to $1 billion overall. And it's certainly now going to have to rely completely on its overseas performance, as it's dwindling quick in the US, and it likely won't get to 200 million. In fact, when we look at the upcoming releases, as I mentioned before, it looks like it will struggle to get even past 150 million. Will it reach the overall take of the previous installment, Fast 9, which was around 720 million? I'm going to say it will probably still get to that amount, but I can't imagine it getting anywhere past $800 million. So once again, this will really put a halt on the hoped aspirations recently talked about by Vin Diesel and Universal of a proposed trilogy. Yes, it was recently confirmed that Dwayne Johnson will be returning to the franchise for another installment playing the character of Hobbs. But when we look at this underperformance, when we have all of the characters involved, it really does beg the question as to how much money a lead performance by Dwayne Johnson in the character of Hobbs will make overall. So whilst it's obviously had a very great run, over 20 years now and 10 installments, it's very much looking now that the Fast and Furious franchise is very much coming to an end. Now, to end this video on more positive news, Guardians of the Galaxy continues to perform very well, having a higher drop this time of 51% within US cinemas, dropping down to number 5, which was to be expected given the amount of new releases. It still managed to gross around $10 million in this weekend, and the overall tally within US cinemas now stands at over $322 million. Internationally, the movie now stands at $780 million, so now it's looking like it will clearly get to $800 million worldwide. And I still maintain that anything over $800 million is very much a success for Marvel when you consider all of the doom and gloom statements when the film only opened to $118.4 million. This is overall a very good sign for Marvel, but again, this is only celebration in the short term. It doesn't mean that everything is back to normal as what we saw with phases 1 to 3. There are still issues with Marvel's Phase 5, particularly with the Disney Plus shows, and we'll probably get a better gauge of how much that reception is when we shortly see the release of the Secret Invasion series, which I believe is due for release on June the 12th. And once again, we have to keep pointing later on down the line to the release of the Marvels in November this year to get a better idea of whether Phase 5 is going to enjoy much more of a long-term success or not. But so far, in terms of the Guardians of the Galaxy, it has been a very successful run and a good way to end the franchise, and certainly a short-term win for Marvel's Phase 5 so far. So those are my overall thoughts and feelings and box office breakdown covering the opening weekend of Spider-Man Across the Spiderverse. Let me know what you think in the comments below. How big do you think the movie will be? Do you think it has a shot at grossing $1 billion worldwide? And do you think its success overall will garner in a new era for Miles Morales in terms of a live action interpretation? And will the character be solely represented by Sony, or will they continue to share the character alongside the MCU and feed off the success of that franchise? We will wait and see. But let me know what you think in the comments below. And if you have any other movies or television series or any other topics within the pop entertainment and culture scene that you'd like to see me cover, then also let me know within the comments, and I will see if I can provide further commentary for you on those topics within the future. Please consider hitting like the subscription and notification buttons so I can provide you with more high quality content like this in the future. But that's it for now. Take care of yourselves, and I will see you very, very soon.